Welcome to a Do Not God video production. Alright, presentation. Still isn't very well produced. Anyway, part 2. I have a conversation with social experimentalist Daniel Shine. And just, we sort of agree. But we do have, issues that are contentious between us in terms of a completely different understanding. And all of those, in my opinion, are part of having to interact with other people and explain your position versus their position and the evidence you're weighing and the significance and the meaning of it. And some of that is significant. So even though I can agree with some people 99% of the time, but the 1% where we disagree can be really, really important. And that's part of the tragedy of this whole living thing. It's just another one of those thorny parts that just make the whole experience frustrating and irritating, frankly. But anyway, so we'll just... this is just it was kind of a casual interaction, and so neither of us thought it sufficient on its own, and so I'm going to use it as a groundwork for talking about how to talk about these sensitive subjects with humans, and just point out how I do recognize where my style is in conflict with function, and just the truth. So, play some more video. We should be able to do this. Let's see. Should be able to do that.
Okay, so I've got a couple of questions for you, which I've also prepared. You said earlier on that you can't do this alone, and I think that one of the, I think that we, part of our evolutionary makeup is that we can't do things alone. Yeah.
All right, so this is one of the things where I think we do have some conflict or disagreement. I think it's all kind of what you're maturated into, the role you play in terms of what you enjoy, and so you can certainly be a human and find activities that are more than interesting enough. Like many scientists weren't terribly social. You could probably think of some other kinds of people that really just didn't need much of a social life. They had their work, and that was enough of a competition, or enough of a, they could gain enough satisfaction. Pioneer types that went out in the wilderness, So it's not impossible, let's say, to function without other people. I guess you could argue that some of the better science was done by individuals, not necessarily by groups, that we don't function very well, frankly, at groups when we're trying to get something done, because the individuals aren't very good team players in a lot of cases. It's not the most efficient mechanism, but whatever, it doesn't, yeah, so that's enough.
I agree with you on that.
Well, unless the world gets crazy enough to, they elected Trump president of the United States, okay, an imbecile who has a track record of being a psychotic, self-absorbed lunatic. So technically, I might be able to do it myself, right? If I can just get elected president, okay? Because then I can assure that we will have the graceful exit, the millisecond of our last moment. Yes, sort of joking, but it's really not a joke, right? The world runs on bullshit, and so the people who are kind of naysay about what's possible in the future should always just sort of recognize just how ludicrous the past is, and there's no, what are the boundaries of a reasonable planned thought about what could happen as either a deliberate or indeliberate result of human beings having to deal with this whole, banging into the future and figuring out that the future is not going to, there's not going to be some new drug kind of thing. I mean, yes, there'll be new drugs, but I mean, there won't be some better answer to the questions of our purpose. There are always going to be kind of crappy answers where, we think we're going to go find something that is great, and it's not. There's no, there's no, there's no Enterprise, the spaceship, and even if there was, there's no place to go. And it's just the truth. There's no magically interesting world or universe that needs humans to come to the rescue. It just isn't.
Yeah, but I mean, the thing is that you'd have to think a little bit carefully about how you're going to do that. I think it might be a bit late.
Well, I'm just saying things. Your whole shtick, okay, is laughing at the ludicrous nature of these hypocrisies that are all around us. So I'm just saying, why would I think it's all that improbable when we see how ludicrous the world is? Okay, I mean, I mean, they reward people. So I'm just going to provide an example of one of the imbecilities of our existence, but you can just list a whole bunch of the silly things that go on, and how inefficient our societies are, and the waste that's everywhere, and and then you can get into things like just talking about the fact that look at the religion is still alive. People still think it's viable, it's reasonable to be religious when it's been exposed to them that yes, we traveled the world, we found out that people have all kinds of nutty fables that they live by, and they're just nutty fables. They have no truth value, and yet they're clinging to theirs, clinging to it, cherishing it, when it's already been exposed as just more Stone Age nonsense, silly garbage, left over from the past, and they're so ethnically racist or biased that they think their silly stories, the silly stories of their ancestors, are precious. And the funny thing is, a lot of them aren't even their ancestors. I mean, the stories are somebody else's ancestor's story. It's too silly. Murder for failing. To be an incompetent murderer means you should be rewarded and spend less time in jail, right? So the guy who successfully murders is somehow, the guy who did it competently, okay, is the guy who's serving more time and punished. The incompetent one is rewarded for their incompetence. Yeah, well, and the other ones are like the drunk driving. You just happen to get unlucky and you kill somebody and you get 30 times more, punishment. I mean, not just a little bit more, 30 times more. Like somehow being unlucky is something worthy of punishment. It just doesn't make any sense. It's so illogical. Same act, completely disproportional penalties. So even when we have opportunities to take a very cruel system, a very unfair system, a system where deserve has nothing to do with it, and when we have the opportunity to make deserve have something to do with it, we don't. People worship inheritance. They worship it. It's like a wonderful, beautiful thing to cheat for your kind. Yeah. I've got a long way to go if people are, this stupid. Although you're incompetent. Yeah.
So I'm coming back to what I said to you, what I asked you in the first place, is I can certainly attribute my antinatalism journey to certainly in large part to watching your videos, and I think that's something that you can I assume you feel some sense of at least maybe fleeting satisfaction in the knowledge that there are, that there.
Yeah, that once in a while I'm convincing enough to convince 1 out of 1,000 or 2,000 or 10,000 people. Yeah, it's not a very good track record. So, yeah. Um, yeah, and it's not a great subject. It's not the kind of thing where you feel good because you've made somebody else have to see, the ugly. Or you make it easier for them to see. Give them more reason to see it. Give them more metaphors to, play in their head. Yeah, you can't feel too good about that. Um, so yeah, it's just kind of, yeah, it's hard to find good reason to feel good because this is kind of a war and it is all kind of ugly and it's kind of hard to have any fun moments.
There are people out there who are affected by what you're saying, and that hopefully as a result of that there will be at least, even if you would save one human being from coming into existence, that has the potential of saving thousands and thousands of their descendants.
That's a tricky one, though. It's you can do all these things and you can argue them to the natural end. You just think it through. And when you think it all the way through, you kind of know that the resources are really going to dictate how many people there are. So if the society can manufacture the extra resources, then there will be more people. And it's like the absence or the scarcity of some resources are what limits population in some respect. So it's like you're just changing who lives and dies, not really changing the fact that somebody lives. So that part of it is a little disappointing, that it's probably not a one-to-one relationship, essentially. You're not really preventing 1 million future existences because the future will allocate resources, and if the person you prevented had lived, they would have prevented other people from living, and so it's probably more trade-off than I like. And it's a little bit like the vegan story. It's you can feel good that you saved a few pigs. Wow, I saved 10 or 15 from brutal creation and mistreatment and slaughter. But on the scale of the carnage, it's just hard to feel like, oh wow, that's really great. I saved 10 out of 10 million. It's just such a drop in the giant sludge bucket. It's hard to feel good about it. It's certainly a good, but it's just hard to feel good about it in that context. Like I said, you think about it a little too much, and everything turns to shit when you think it. You really look at it, it all turns to shit.
And that's great, yeah. And that's kind of what motivates me these days, is knowing that I think it is possible that through touching thousands of people in different ways, that I might be part of preventing at least one person from being brought into existence. But
yeah, so I mean, it's sort of a different ambition. Like I said, I'm sort of I want it all, and so I'm not going to be satisfied with 1 millimeter of the ocean. It's just not enough seawater for me. So I want to dry the whole thing up. I want to stop it all. And so I'm really just not going to be satisfied with preventing a little bit of the harm. It's just, it's good, fine, but not good enough.
My question is, what is the larger plan? And I'm going to include in this some challenges for you, which I may exclude from the edit. Yeah. Because I am on your side.
I'm probably going to put in my responses to the questions you've already asked because there were reasonable answers. So I mean, I'm already recording this, and so I can so I'm not worried about that. I mean, so anyway, yeah. So that's a little bit of a awkward thing, is the engineering of product, and it's just not something I've spent much time on. I mean, I've made some videos on deliberately attempting to be a little artistic or a little concise or scripted and controlled, and I don't like it much, and I don't like doing it. It's work, and I'm not that satisfied with my capacity to do that so far. But yes, it's something that needs to be worked on. I think the human race can be communicated with in an honest way. I think that most people can be, if you can get their attention long enough to have the conversation. So whether we have to bribe them or whatever you have to do to seduce them to endure the couple of hours it would take to lay out the truth and dare them, to violate it, to just declare that they're not going to care about those facts, and they're going to commit these kind of obvious crimes once you spell it out. It really is Frankenstein-esque, irresponsible to be dragging the non-existent to play in your fairy tale bullshit world of make-believe, to live their life as if there's a heaven and a God and all of that mush. If you it's another argument that can be made to the religious folk, is to just simply point out, well, what if you're wrong and there's no God and there's no heaven and there's no hell and all of this is all there was? Do you really think you should be proud that that's what you've imposed? So anyway, is a short life of drudgery among a bunch of thieves and liars. You think you should be praised for creating somebody who had to endure that? Yeah, I don't think so. I would argue that all of this is...
What's behind the question is that whilst I actually really kind of have enjoyed your style at some stage, there's a lot of the stuff that I like that you do. I think that there are a lot of people that will be put off by various things that you're doing. For example,
so he doesn't like the vaping thing. Like I said, I didn't really notice that the vaping the mic picks it up more in this arrangement, so that's something I got to consider. And but the rest of it is kind of a, I do have kind of a shabby living circumstances. It's just the way it is. It doesn't bother me, so it frankly shouldn't bother you. And I don't buy clothes, and I'm just not, that whole style thing. But obviously, I know I could do better. I could make a better effort. But again, that's just kind of more energy in directions I don't think that are very important. But yeah, so certainly I can fix the language, and attempt to be less uninhibited in how I state things. Thoughtful. But then that does slow down the whole process again. But you can speed videos up. So, I could process the video after it's produced and speed it up a bit to fix that. So anyway, these production issues aren't irrelevant. It's just not a subject I like very much.
You're doing at the moment, yeah? I'm not sure what you're actually smoking. What are you smoking?
Oh, it's just tobacco.
It's tobacco?
Yeah. It's nicotine. I should have said, but whatever. I don't know what to do with the volume just because we're talking back and forth, so it's a little difficult. Yeah, I'm a nicotine
The
addict.
fact that you're smoking tobacco, right? Again, I question. Well, I mean, again, I still haven't completely understood what your plan is. If your plan is just to keep making videos, and just carry on doing that and hoping for the best, fair enough. But what is your ultimate goal to move humanity forward into some place where we have a graceful exit?
Yeah, what? Yes. The simple answer. Obviously, I think you have to make the arguments, though, and I guess that's the fundamental argument is that, I'll probably say it in here a different way or maybe the same way, but it wasn't my intention to be the poster child or the flag holder guy, or whatever. The point man, I don't know. Just my intention to make these arguments and see if anybody can counter argue. And I don't mind making the arguments. But yes, if style is going to be important, then yes, I'm going to fail. Because I just couldn't care less. But I don't think it really should matter to the people who are going to pay attention to such arguments. Certainly the intellectuals weren't bothered by Einstein. There's been a lot of eccentrics in the history of reality, and people accommodated. They could figure out that it didn't matter, so it really shouldn't matter. Lots of people have defects, some of them physical, and people get past it and they understand they're not going to judge the person based on those inadequacies, whether those are inadequacies you think they could change or whether they're not inadequacies they could change. It shouldn't really matter to somebody who takes anything seriously, and it's a pretty serious subject. So if that kind of crap is going to distract somebody, you can almost argue they're almost not ready for the subject. I could certainly argue. Anyway, take a little break and I'll be back. Okay, should be back, I think. I'm pretty sure. Sort of looks like it. So we'll assume so. No, back to the video and such. I've never.
Is that even realistic? And if so, is what you're doing the best way to get there? It's a question that I get asked as well, right?
Yeah, well, I actually heard you in the conversation talking about it a little bit, and that's why I actually have it written down, the word futility, okay, it's in my notes, because I disagree fundamentally with most anti-nihilists, okay, 99% of them. I don't think there's anything futile about this argument, because this is so dirt simple, okay? The fact is a 7-year-old could do it, because when I was 7 years old, I did it, okay, so there's no nuclear physics here, okay? You don't need any big complex equations to figure out you're torturing shit. Okay, I do get a little loud. So anyway, so this is, it's his point was more to the point that I'm not a very good spokesperson, and my point is that it really doesn't matter. I mean, these arguments aren't that complicated, and resistance to them is inside the psychology of the person resisting them. It's almost like the vegetarian thing. I mean, there's people, like you'll say to them, I have said these words, like, what do you think? Do you really think our ancestors were chasing after, like, squirrels or something, and that they'd catch one and that they'd, rip its raw, they'd rip its fur and hide off, and try to eat its flesh without eating its guts, because somehow they'd have to know not to eat its guts or they'd get sick. For what? How do you think that works? And what do you think happens when humans do eat something like that they can't digest? What do you think it does? It doesn't give them nutrition. It shoots right through them, and they get nothing out of it. I've pointed out that steak tartare, raw beef, was introduced into America as a dietary plan for a very overweight person. I mean, the idea was for him to lose weight, not to be, efficient and to gain great strength or power through that consumption. And so fire is what made animal flesh edible. It's what made it smell good or taste good. All of that happened because of fire. And before fire, we weren't eating dead animals. Whether we killed them or not, we just weren't. Didn't happen. And it's just a fact. And the resistance, because people want to defend it. And they want to find some reason why they have some great excuse when they have none biologically. Because it's just not true. It's just not a part, it's not a necessary part of our function. It just isn't. Now, even if it was, as I've pointed out, it doesn't change much. If crocodiles got intelligent, what do you think their obligations would be? Their obligations would to say the same thing. If they got intelligence and humans were still stupid, do you think it would be okay for the crocodiles to say, they're the lower form, so to speak, and I don't even know how to make an equation about their intelligence, but regardless, you really think they're rationalizations that, they really don't know what's happening, they're stupid animals, we can eat the minkies, we can torture them, it's okay. I mean, come on. No, civilization and maturity and intelligence means you have to accept the fact that maybe your design isn't so good because your designer wasn't so good. And that's the truth. And any atheist should be able to admit it. That they can't use a resort to nature as a justification for anything. And even when they try to do that, they're doing it so fallaciously and badly that it's silly. There's just no defense.
What the hell? I mean, I have to explain. I mean, what do I actually have to do? Rub their blood in your face? I mean, that's how people, they become vegan. Well, the simple argument, right, for somebody eating meat is, well, why don't you kill the crap yourself then? Okay, why don't you kill a dog or a cat or something just the same as that pig? And show me how brave you are and how your philosophy says it's meaningless and how you don't care about its welfare. Go ahead and show me you believe what you're saying, right? I mean, so, I'm sorry, I'm getting a little frustrated because I hate this futility crap. I mean, what's the point then? If you're not going to win the war, then all you're going to have is bloody soldiers. Okay? I say give up. If you don't think you can win, just give up, all right? Because it's better than the war. It's better than having the war. If you're not ready to fight to win, get out of the...
All right, so that's probably saying it a little harsher than it needs to be said. But I guess that's sort of the truth that I'm arguing for, is that you will cause there's going to be a lot of stress in making this argument. And even when you get a majority of people to believe in it, that majority is going to have a lot of stress having to drag the minority into acceptance. So this is a war, and the long-term victory is the real goal. And if you're really not after that, maybe you shouldn't fight, because maybe it will be just more failure, is going to be quite ugly. Getting to 39% is going to be really nasty for that 39%, because they're going to lose, and it's going to be tough and painful. And so yeah, it's I just saying, if you're going to get bloody, then get bloody. I mean, it's all the way kind of thing, all or nothing, sort of.
Fight. I mean, I hate to put it that way, but yeah, I mean, that's just such a wrong attitude to have about something. Again, it isn't that complicated. I mean, I'm not a rude person, right? So anybody who's not rude can figure it out. If I want to go to the fun park and I have to tie somebody up, beat the crap out of them, give them polio to do it, then I'm not going, because I'm not an asshole, right? I'm not going to torture somebody so I can...
So, there's so many ways to just understand this. I mean, right now on Earth, there's a certain number of people having a good time, They're having little special moments right now. And there's a bunch of others of us doing something, we're not in pain, like hard pain, but we're not really having a great time. We're just doing our work and doing our thing and being a good little robot and mechanically functioning. And then there's these others who are right now dying and are very sick and having a really bad time, really bad day, really bad week, maybe a bad month, maybe a bad year. And it's really bad. And what's so difficult about imagining that if what you're really saying is that for these people to have this little fun bit, this is the part you're cherishing, is the ones having a good time. And the price is always going to be the ones that aren't going to have the good time, the ones having a bad time. And it just, like I said, who but a jerk, I'll say jerk, could think it would be okay for me to force somebody to have a bad time for my good time. Where I would actually torture somebody for my trivial pleasures, and most of them are very trivial. I mean, how much harm would I cause someone else to have the best day of my life, whatever that day was? And I would argue it's not going to be very much pain. I wouldn't force them to, do much more than stub their toe. I can't imagine it would be a very high price if that's what I had to do to have my pleasure. And I'm just saying, I think that fundamental ethic can likely be understood by most people, that, yeah, they get that. They get that they wouldn't want to be used by somebody else for their silly song and dance. They wouldn't want their kids, run over, because somebody else really needed to get to the store. I mean, those are silly things to have happen in life. And can't be defended.
Go to Disneyland, right? So if the price of Disneyland was you had to hit a kid and paralyze it, okay, who would have say, I'm going anyway? I have a right. It's my right.
I'm worth it. I mean, that's just so silly. To think that anybody who would be having a rational conversation with another person, I mean, appalling is all you could say, right? If somebody actually did that, it would be appalling. Appalling ethics.
Wouldn't you just slap that? No, you wouldn't slap that person. You'd hit him with your car. You'd say, you're too stupid to live on Earth. Okay, if you're that rude, you're too stinking stupid. There, that's my argument to futility. Forget the futility. This is...
Yes. It really is a simple argument, and, obviously people are really full of shit. I mean, it's their garbage problem, okay? Their brains have a bunch of delusions, and we haven't freed them from it. So in spite of the fact that atheism has grown, some sense of understanding that the world changes when that happens hasn't grown, because the atheists are just as life-loving and silly as the silly Christians. They're still committing the same crimes based on logic. Again, like not recognizing the animals aren't there for you to exploit. That, like you, they're victims of a process of evolution, and their pain and suffering is real, and it must be respected.
Not a complex argument. It's just that people are religious. People are stone cold stupid, okay? I mean, mommy teaches them how to do things with their little pacifiers or whatever happens to them. They tickle their butts the right way or something else, and they powder them, and then they just say whatever mommy says is true, and they never grow up. Again, this is about growing up. It's about growing up.
So I guess I shouldn't blame just mommies, and the daddies do it too, and it's all these lies that kids are raised in. And there is no conversation about how dangerous their life. People don't tell their kids, "Hey, your life is going to be really dangerous, and everything you do, you got to really measure, because this is what's going to happen to you if you just make slight mistakes." FUBAR, it's waiting for you. Little tiny mistakes in who you pick as friends, and all kinds of things, and all this is huge jeopardy, and they just don't do that because they think they're going to, frighten their children. No, they're going to prepare them, because that is the truth. That everything you do does impact other people. Every 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 exchange you make with the world affects somebody else's capacity to make an exchange. You will change their fate, and you can change it for the better and the worst. And the fact is, because we have such a dysfunctional society, you don't know one from the other many times. You don't know what the right thing to do. You can't tell, because deserve isn't going to have much to do with it. It's again, so people just are raised in a pool of synthetic crap, and they adapt to it, and they learn to eat it and live in it and breathe it. But it's crap. It's nonsense. They're all living in fairy tales they were told as children, pretty much.
Climbing a little bit out of the maze and realizing what a robot you are, and how you're just full of crap, and how you're scheming. Everything you do is a scheme. Every plan is like, well, I'll be friends with that person because they're popular. I won't be friends with them because, well, they have cancer and they're just going to be a liability and a pain in the ass. I mean, everything is cynically sucks. I mean, you got to love Monty Python, right? The satire is obvious, okay? I mean, The Life of Brian says it all. You watch that movie and you should figure out, yes, it is crack Suicide Squad. Yes, it is a bunch of stupid arguments about absolutely nothing. Okay, everybody is full, you're buying rocks to throw at people. I mean, it is a perfect description of ludicrous, and that is our existence. It is ludicrous, wasteful. The carnage is grotesque. You can't even imagine,
Satisfactory rant. Yeah, so that's part of the argument here, is that, part of the counter argument is that here it is so ludicrous, and it's been shown in lots of movies and lots of comedy and lots of everything about just how really pathetic it all is, and yet people seem unaffected. The cynicism just doesn't become real. It's just a joke, and it's not just a joke. It's real. The pain is real. The suffering is real. The torture is real. And they're just kind of glibly walking through the torn up bodies on the battlefield, making jokes about how stupid that guy looks with only one eye and his nose turned around upside down on his face or something. I mean, they're just not getting it. So the argument has to start somewhere else and get to that problem of just how offensive it is, in a sense, to minimize and mock the price.
They even had aliens in that movie, right? And the aliens were just as silly, right? Two little drunk aliens running from the cops. I mean, this is our reality. Life is a piece of shit when you look at it, and the only thing Monty Python did wrong is they shouldn't have started whistling. They should have said, wake the fuck up, okay, and quit torturing shit for no good reason.
I guess that's what I'm saying, is that, all these satires lacked was the easy presentation of the solution. That this nonsense, this book of crap, we don't have to keep writing new pages in the book of crap. We can say, oh, this book is crap, sign it, and close the book. And just say, yeah, no more. It's a stupid story, and it needs to be, we need the credits to roll. Be done with it.
Is it okay to swear?
So what I'm trying to get from this is, I guess, so your plan is to win.
To convince people, yes. Look, intelligent people right now on Earth, right? If you give people a high school education, they're already going for extinction. All the people that have a high school education, if you put them in a big pool, they've already voted for extinction.
So, I've brought this up previously, and I don't know why it doesn't seem to impress other people, but yes, we're already we've already won the argument in some respects to the people who have heard the argument, in the sense that they are cautious about having kids. So once they have an education, they sort of understand this is a responsibility. I don't know if I'm up to the task. I want to have a career. I don't want, blah, blah, blah. And they make a different life choice. And so the later a woman has children, the less children she has. Not just because she's having them later, but it's dramatic. Okay, in places like India, it's half as many children are produced by a girl who goes to high school. So it's a real thing. It's not a fake thing. That this is really just a blight of ignorance. And that's why human population continues to grow. It's not because the advanced world is producing a ton of babies with all their technology. They're not. And all of the advanced civilizations would be in population decline if they weren't importing idiots who really haven't learned anything yet. Whatever you want to call the poor huddled masses of blight, who are lost in their religious fables and fake stories of purpose and function.
Because they're having less than enough kids to replacement population. So they're on a steady decline. And the only thing keeping human population growing is a tiny percentage that are having 95 kids. I mean, it's the ignorant and the stupid who just pop out the babies because they never give it a...
So, there has to be kinder and gentler ways to talk about the poor, but, I'm just doing it just saying it directly and calling a spade a spade. Poverty and ignorances are blights, okay? They're not something to be sympathetic when it's reproducing. It's obnoxious to be in an unqualified position, okay, by both ignorance, lack of skill, and poverty, and say I'm qualified to, make more human beings. It's like Frankenstein with a really bad, dirty, stinking laboratory doing Frankenstein experiments. It's even a worse idea. It's bad enough when he has the high tech and the castle and the whole thing, but it's even a worse idea when some moron's doing it in a stable somewhere. And that's not a complex idea. And it's not being unfair to just point out facts that the people who have to be that need educating in some more direct way because they aren't seeing it. It's hard to say something, negative. I mean, I'm sympathetic. I don't like rich people at all, but I'm just saying the poor are just obviously irresponsible.
Damn thought they're living on a garbage pile somewhere in South America and they're popping out babies. That's the blight that we have to fix. The rest of the world's already convinced having kids is dangerous. Having kids is a huge responsibility. Having kids is problematic. It's the poor people who haven't figured it out because somebody else is paying for it.
Well, I'm not sure I'd agree with you on that. I think that there are. I think that most people on this planet. I question whether most people on this planet are even human. They're so far gone that I think your assumption. I mean, I agree with you. It's not rocket science. Once you get it, it's not rocket science. In fact, one of the ideas that I had, which I haven't spoken about much to the anti-natalists, was to create content for children. And I think if you were to ask the average 7-year-old child, if you were to tell them the story of the world with all the bad parts, you say once upon a time the world was created, and then there were wars and there were diseases, and then you said to them,
heartbreak, ugly, beautiful, rich, poor, the whole. You just give them a taste of the struggle and the ambition and what it's all made out of and the triviality of it. This competitions we keep playing with ourselves against ourselves. The thems are always us's. And yeah, just what a futile pile of slop. And yeah, a kid could understand it, but you really can't do that. I mean, in the current environment, they're not going to let you, okay, do that. So I don't know whether there's much, use to it in the current circumstances, because clearly there's every effort to protect children from any truth when it comes to existence. And that's why they're so rebellious in some ways. It's just they're looking for something that makes sense, and they're in some ways prevented from hearing anything that makes sense. Yeah, something like that.
And then you say to the kids, okay, this is just a story. You've got two buttons here. The red button will just keep it as a story, and the green button will make it into real. What would you do? And I'm sure that the overwhelming majority of children would say, oh no, to keep that as a story, don't make that real. So I agree with you that it is a very simple thing to understand once you get it. But
So I don't think there's a but that's necessary there. It's really simple, and what's the obstacle is that people are insanely passionate about things that don't matter, like their nepotism and their their racism and their culturalisms and ethnicities and all this other crap that doesn't matter, and they make it the focus of their existence, and they see anything that's a threat to that. And certainly some idea that you have to defend your life is a threat to that, and something like that. But yeah, I mean, clearly the world is living a preposterous lie, and they're all wearing makeup, and they're all fake and phony and plastic and completely insincere in their existence, and in their whenever their private lives are exposed, it's always the hypocrisy of their existence is made obvious, and all their fake statements of concern.
I think that from my experience of speaking to people, to lots and lots of people, about this subject, that it's so counter to their both their nature and their nurture. Their DNA.
So I don't think it really is, though. I think their empathy and sympathy exists, and that's why they love their dog, and they love their cats, and they love things, and so they can understand caring for it. And most people don't want to watch their pet die badly. It's just that the indoctrination of this idea that people need religion, or people need to be controlled by something, and they have to, if they get cynical or they get real, that somehow they become evil or selfish or greedy, when exactly the opposite is made possible, because now they can be more ethical. They don't accept the stagnant and dead ethics of a God who cares more about being prayed to than the welfare of his creation.
DNA has hijacked us, right? I think, and also.
So that's another part where we fundamentally disagree. The nature and nurture argument. That I would argue this is all just memes, and the fact that there is all this cultural diversity is sort of evidence of that, and the whole different kinds of tribes, and there was different kinds of civilizations that have different ethics and different ways of living, and it's really all what you've been. Unfortunately, people are just too connected to their heritage, and they need to recognize that they're an individual and they're responsible, and they can't rely on heritage as some defense. The accomplishments of their people or some other kind of crap. They have to earn it, and they have to earn their opinions. They can't just keep regurgitating what their party line. They have to actually understand a subject.
Not just the DNA, but the whole of the culture. Certainly the culture I was brought up in. I was brought up in a religious culture that was very, very natalist, and the natalism was so entrenched that it wasn't, it wasn't like if you were to ask my fellow religionists, wouldn't even know what a natalist was. It's not like it's so deep in the culture, it's hidden from people.
Well, I know, but it didn't.
Right, but it didn't get there. It doesn't get there from nowhere, and it really is just a philosophy. And so, yeah, it has a lot to do with, for some people, it is a race war. It is a lot of things. You have to breed so we can catch up, and we can be the majority, or some kind of bullshit like that. Some obligation to, they're in a race over race, the race, and that kind of stupid shit. So there's lots of stupid reasons. But the whole point is if the conversation takes place, and you have to have the conversation about what's the ethics of it, there's no ground anymore. They run out of ground very quickly to defend it. To have their dog to love, would they agree to kill 4 other dogs? Brutally. I don't think most of them would. So if they knew what they're really buying, would they really buy it? And I'm arguing that no. If they really know what they're buying, they wouldn't buy it.
Well, it did fool me when I had my children.
Well, I mean, did you have them because you had some certainty that was the right thing to do, or some personal desire, or did you do it more because you knew this is what you were supposed to do? As would be my argument. Did you sincerely have children?
Did I sincerely have children?
well, you know what I'm saying? Like a thoughtful act.
What's that?
Well, like a thoughtful act. See, I got my parents to admit that they had kids because that's just what everybody did. They didn't even talk about it. They just did it because that's what everybody did. So, yeah, if they would have had an hour-long conversation beforehand and said, well, what if, and what if, and what if, then maybe they wouldn't have had kids, because then they would have figured out, oh yeah, this is going to be very expensive, and we want to travel the world, and we want to do this, and we like doing this, so maybe we shouldn't do this. But they never even had the conversation.
Neither did I.
So
Neither did I. I didn't even know there was.
Right. So that's just part of the argument, is that people are just they're at a market and they're buying stuff, and they don't know what it cost. I mean, really cost. What kind of horrible things were done, and what kind of horrible things are the price you're going to pay for it. And I'm just saying, once they know, and then they buy it, well, then then they're really subject to ridicule. But the engine is really just ignorance. The only thing keeping it going is the fact that it's made out of these fairy tales and these happily ever after notions, and everything's going to work out all right, and somehow you really just don't die horribly, and somehow the life isn't a failure even when it's a failure. This perpetual, let's try to paint it with the silver whitewash, silver lining bullshit. And that's all the thing's running on. That's the only gasoline keeping it going.
The conversations I had.
So that's all I'm saying is that from my perspective, the ignorance that exists in the world is defeatable through the right presentation of the argument. So I would sort of argue that maybe the people in Islam haven't seen the life of Brian. You know what I'm saying? Maybe they haven't been exposed to enough of a recognition of how this is ludicrous, okay? And living in the 2,000-year-old past is preposterously ludicrous, okay? It's not even, we have to take responsibility for our existence, and we can't just scapegoat all the time and say it's God.
Right, and Mother Nature and Circle of Life kind of silly stories. It's like I heard somebody bring up Bambi the other day in an argument and calling it, like this idea that Bambi, is some flowery story or like some fairy tale, and it really wasn't a fairy tale. I mean, the kid's mother gets murdered, and then the whole forest catches on fire, and it's no fairy tale here. Now it has the the stupid beginning of birth and the ending is birth, and so it's doing its circle of life crap, trying to make a justification in it, but it's not like it lacked showing you, well, shit, that was no good. I mean, that wasn't worth it. I mean, what's in here? What's the moral of the story? Is life is hard, and what's the profit? To just redo the same thing, Bambi 2, Thumper 2, just redo the same crap all over again? Seems kind of a stupid idea.
That's fault. No, whatever happens here is our fault. Because we're the participants and we're facilitating it, we're feeding it.
Well, I would disagree with you, see, to some degree. I talk about, sort of in a comedic way, I talk about people I speak about people not honouring their parents. I say, out loud in the middle of the street, don't honour your parents. Basically, you sue them. You should get compensation from your parents. They should be apologising to you for bringing you here, right?
Well, and especially the parents who really didn't provide anything. Really were just a liability and a fuck up and a mess. I mean, the crack whores and the rest of they should be doing a lot of apologizing for how they couldn't have paid any attention. And then all the people who have their careers and pretend you can raise kids and still have your private life. I mean, that kind of horse shit. Yeah, they should be apologizing. All the stuff that people did drag their kids to, not because they thought it would be good for the kids, but because it would be good for them. And, it's just, yeah. I mean, there just should be. People should be obliged to accept responsibility for the mess they've made in their life.
And I say this in a comedic way, but I kind of mean it as well, in a sort of. And what I'm saying with this is that basically, and I say, that your parents are responsible for all your problems, because without their decision to have you, you wouldn't have any problems. However, when my children accuse me of that, and they do, because I've said it, so they say, well, that means you're responsible. I then say to them, yes, I agree, I am responsible for your problems. However, it's probably not great for you to feel too much resentment towards me, because at the end of the day, although I am responsible for your problems, the only reason why I chose to have you was because my parents chose to have me and brought me up in a way which was irresponsible,
Right, but there's a point where you have to say, people can't plead ignorance anymore. There is, especially now, things are getting more, there's more and more access. I mean, we have so much access to so much more of the truth, so much younger in life, that anybody growing up now with those fairy tale delusions of Santa Claus and Easter and all that, all the bullshit that they, would sell to us even as we're getting pretty old, you can't get away with any of that crap now. And nobody can play the game that I was too deluded. Nobody exposed me to the truth. Nobody gave me an opportunity to hear another story. There's people with bullhorns on the street telling you the other story now. So you just can't use that excuse that you were isolated and you had no idea. I mean, that's, you couldn't have stepped out of your programming, because there's all kinds of signs that there's different programming and that you're responsible for who you are. You can't be blaming systems when you can choose to be reprogrammed. You can choose to press the change button, and that's part of your reality. And the people in the past didn't have those buttons. And that's a sort of a truth. And I'd say that sort of happened in my generation, that the world did start getting bigger, more open, and access expanded, and you didn't have to have a closed mind.
they didn't.
Right, I know, but see, I'm still suggesting that humanity doesn't stay stagnant. So just as we have learned how to make blue LEDs, this is just another part of our maturation. So human maturation will require that people have to migrate from the stone cold, I mean, real primitive philosophy, right? And that's what a lot of the world is still.
Yeah, I mean, most of the world is living in fables, and if you thought about these as like an interaction between aliens in the future or something, would the ET moment really be, oh, do you feel God's presence too? Oh, can you just imagine Moses in his big long white robes, and oh, it's just so special. I mean, that's not how I can possibly imagine such a conversation about our dilemma as living things in the universe. The conversation is going to be about how, this is, we're living in this deterministic universe of mechanical function. We're the byproduct of this evolutionary process. We have some skills, but we haven't learned how to reform them into something other than scheming skills. And the schemes are always something to do with what's in it for me, or my kind, or my people, or some other crap, fully illegitimate as foundational or fundamental prime directives. If the Federation shot out into space with its spaceships with a prime directive of what's in it for me, we'd think them pretty superficial. Yeah, kind of obviously. Well, I'll take a little break and finish up with this segment. Alright, I'm back. Wasn't much of a break, so let's see if we can get to a good ending point. Whoops. Wrong button again.
Stuck in this real primitive philosophy, and I'd say it's partly because they don't have an internet connection, they're not exposed to other ideas, they're not even allowed to question the authorities, and so until we liberate them to at least have the freedom to say, I don't have to be this, I don't have to bow to Mohammed, I don't have to bow to Jesus, I don't have to be a slave to some archaic notion that's been passed down to me in a completely illegitimate way, in the sense that it's only because two people had control over me when I was maturating instead of the world controlling who I was going to become. So I'm just saying, once we open
are a pool of ideas. I didn't have a pool of ideas to choose from. They gave you limited exposure to the world and a limited clothes to wear. And then the rest of it just sort of been habit, right? Once you get comfortable wearing a certain kind of clothes, your blue jeans and such, you really don't want to change. And that's part of this conversation is about, is just the fact that people are resistant to change, to grow up, to have to change. I mean, it's I don't like change, but it's the obligation when the facts require it, so to speak. So, we'll say this is a good enough point to end. So, till the next time and such. Yeah, I think so. Well, let's just see if it finishes.
Once we open the technology, we will open the minds. And once the minds are open, I'm saying then we can have the argument. Then you can make this argument about, you can't really have a rational value, a conversation with somebody who's still stuck in a notion that God created it on purpose. If you know what I mean? I mean, there's no rational argument to somebody who really believes there's a God, except to say, well, God sends people to hell, so you don't want to have a baby because you might go to hell and you wouldn't want that to happen, right? So you know what I mean? You have to do it in their framework, and their framework isn't going to get you anywhere to understanding that all these other sentient organisms are also at jeopardy, that you have an obligation to all these rape victims are screaming right in your face, and you're pretending in some glib manner that they don't matter. Well, of course they matter. And of course you're a horrible, disgusting person to be going to your Dairy Queen while you watch all these things being raped on your way, and start to think that it's all part of the fun. It's not part of the fun. It's part of the horror.
All right. That's a better place to end. Next, we'll get on to probably the nature-nurture argument, where we do kind of disagree and such. A little bit. But whatever. I can hit the pause button there. I can do that. Alright, so I'll hit this one.